For people who are so unfamiliar with actually getting on podcasts, like what is the tips of actually getting on these shows? And you've dealt with so many of them because you've gotten so many people on podcasts. What do you find are like the successful, like the do's and don'ts that you'd say on getting on podcasts, like to get yourself on podcasts?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So we have an insider perspective because we started out, my background was understanding the know-how of PR, right? And like, how do you approach media? So we always just took podcasts and go, okay, we're going to approach a podcast exactly like we're going to approach the New York Times, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have the right pitch. You have to approach the host with what's in it for them because you want to make sure that there's value there. It's not just like, oh, my client sells the best widgets, so they should talk about widgets. It's like no, nobody's ever going to have you on. Nobody cares, right? Like, why? I don't care. But we want to make sure it's okay. Well, the show, this is what your show talks about, or this is the theme of your show, and this is why this client can provide value to your show. But on the other side, we also have the podcaster's perspective, right? Because Jeremy had a podcast before we had Command Your Brand.
Right.
So we were getting pitched by other people and I'm like, why are they saying that? Why are they doing that? Like, so we have both sides of it, how you're supposed to be approaching media and then also what it is that a podcaster wants or doesn't want. Right. So what I like to do, I'll give you a big tip here for people pitching media. You want to make sure that you're not making them go have to find anything, right? Like if I'm approaching you, you better be providing me with, everything that I need in order to make a decision. Why it is that you're approaching me. What are we going to be talking about on the show? Why is this person relevant? Like what makes them have the authority to even be talking about this topic or, these subjects or whatever it is that they want to cover.
Yeah.
And why is it that my audience should care about what they have to say? Because without that and like the kind of painting that full picture of what this person has to offer, it's just like next. Like I'm getting so many other pitches next.
Right. I think it's kind of interesting too, is I don't know if how much podcasts you listen to, but I found like when I was listening to some podcasts, like some people love to enter in their own like personal life and like other really random things about themselves or about what they love. Like, and it's sometimes it's a little weird. I find, I don't know if you've ever listened to some of those podcasts, but are there like things that you suggest people should not say when talking to podcasters, or like they shouldn't dive into in terms of that podcast?
So that's a really good question because there's two sides to that. There's this whole authenticity thing that's, been played out a lot over the past few years. Like, talk about your most humbling experience, talk about when you, I don't know, were starving, living in a car, blah, blah, blah. Like, I definitely like a hero story, but sometimes it's like, they don't need to know all that.
Yeah.
It's a little bit much, like, so there's definitely two sides to that. Like, that's definitely, like, it could be successful if that's also what you're trying to accomplish. Like, if you're trying to connect with those types of people. If you're like, so if I think like if you're in a coaching industry, stuff like that, yes, because those people, if you're listening to like something where somebody's going to want to coach, that might ring true for them, right? So maybe you can get those types of people. If you're listening, like if your audience is like I don't know, we also work in like tech industries or, that I don't think that that's something that's really going to connect with them. You know what I mean? So it definitely depends on who is your audience that you're trying to connect with. And do you think that that's going to have them reach out to you? Because it could either be something good or it could be something that could, I think, stop somebody from reaching out to you. not to say don't be real, always be real, but this whole like authenticity, like give me your darkest hour and air your darkest hour. I don't know if that's really necessary.
Right.
I think I personally like to keep it lighter,
Right.
I like to inspire. I like to look at the positive of things, not necessarily share. Yeah.
Yeah.
Overshare.
Yeah. There's an example I'll give. Like I was listening to a podcast. I think it was and my future brother-in-law kind of showed this to me, where it was like it's like a UFC, it's like a very popular UFC podcast, and he was talking about his experience with marijuana and like how it's just like his whole personal side about that. And it was just kind of like it almost like it really just turned me off, and like how actually he promoted that. It was just like I don't really need to know about all that whole history about how many times you smoked marijuana before the ring, after the ring, and it's kind of like I just sensed that it was just like not my place to be there. You know what I mean? So I kind of appreciate the fact that what people, especially CEOs and founders, are saying are not like, oh yeah, I did this when I was 5 years old, and I said, okay, this is what my life was like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's also a way to develop your audience, right? So like if you look at that, then you're probably not his audience. You
Right.
know what I mean? So he's actually really not trying to communicate to you. Because now he's turning you off and now you're going to go look somewhere else, right? So you want to make sure that when you are developing which type of things you're going to be sharing on a show, it's going to be something you want to connect with the people you want to reach.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful tool too, because it's like you got to put yourself on the right audience with the right people who want to listen to that type of story. You know what I mean? Like I find when you put yourself on some random other show that doesn't have the correct audience, it's sort of a little hard to kind of really connect with what you're trying to do and the product you're trying to sell to those type of people.